King Gray has incredible power and wealth in a world ruled by military strength. He is reborn in a new world filled with magic and monsters, given a second chance at life. However, fixing past mistakes won't be the only problem he faces. Is this the light at the end of the tunnel? Was the legend true? These were the questions our hero asked himself as he lay in bed, feeling heavy. He decided to sit up but felt tired and went back to sleep, certain he wouldn't wake up again. He knew his fate and wondered, was I poisoned? Was I assassinated? He didn't care about who did it as much as he wanted to be the best in this world. The white light appears again, and he's surprised to find himself reborn as a young boy named Arthur. His mother Alice seems kind and caring, while his father Reynolds appears trustworthy despite some childish behavior. Arthur was grateful to be born into a loving family, away from the hostility of his previous life. However, he was frustrated by his inability to control his small body. Arthur noticed he could understand the language people spoke, and that they carried weapons. The old-style buildings made him think he was in the same world, but in the past. His understanding changed when he saw his mother use magic to heal injuries caused by his father's reckless play. He then realized he was in a completely different world where magic truly existed. Despite his strength as a king in his era, which included leading armies, winning battles, and all his achievements, he never felt the happiness he experienced when he was able to crawl for the first time. Through his ability to crawl, he could secretly crawl to his parents' library every night without their knowledge to gather information about this world. From a book on one of the shelves, he learned that the continent he was born in is called Dicathen. It consists of 3 main kingdoms. First, the Elenoir kingdom ruled by elves and located deep in the forest. Second, the Dwarf Kingdom, a vast underground realm that is home to dwarves. And finally, the Sahadon Kingdom, the human realm, which is the most populous area. He noticed that this world and his old world share the fact that they are ruled by monarchies. However, the difference is that in this world, rule is passed down by inheritance, unlike his world which relied on the king being the strongest person. He found that technology in this world is modest due to its reliance on magic. He also noticed that the concept of life force is different in the two worlds. In the old world, life force is called ki, which practitioners use to strengthen their bodies and weapons through rigorous training. But in this world, they have a similar power called mana. Unlike ki, which only existed within a person, mana exists everywhere around us and allows us to use all the powers of nature. This means that mana is much more powerful than kai. He discovered that mages in this world are divided into 2 types: enhancers, who enhance their bodies using mana, allowing them to possess amazing strength, defenses, and agility; conjurers, who project mana to the outside world, allowing them to use the 4 elements and control nature. Arthur discovers that there is a rare type of mage capable of using healing magic, like his mother Alice, and they are called deviants. He is surprised to learn that he was born with the ability to use mana because of his ability to use kai in his previous life. The Kai Center is similar to the Mana Center in this world. According to the book, the first awakening of magic occurs between early adolescence and late adolescence. He discovered that the difference between the 2 energies is that Kai is easier to obtain through stimulation, where internal energies are constantly used. In contrast, in a world that uses magic, luck is the key to obtaining the Mana Core. Arthur begins his attempt to gather the Mana Core, focusing all his concentration on stimulating it. Just as he was about to gather it, his mother interrupted him, grabbing him. She was surprised that he had entered the library by himself. She told him it was time to change his diaper. Arthur continues his attempts to form a Mana Core day after day, until only a small part remains, which he finally gathers into its final form. He persists in his efforts for 2 years. During this time, his mother notices her child's remarkable development compared to other children his age. He prefers going to the city center to observe people curiously rather than playing, so they go almost daily. His constant attempts to sneak into the library daily lead her to decide to move his bed there. However, what worries her is her husband Reynolds, who is ready to teach Arthur how to fight since he started crawling. One day, Arthur watches his father training and notices he's an enhancer. He observes that it takes Reynolds 3 minutes to gather his mana, with which he can move a group of rocks. During his training, Reynolds causes chaos, and Alice comes out yelling at him for the mess he made. Arthur seizes the opportunity and focuses on gathering the last parts of mana he's been collecting for the past 2 years. He finally succeeds in forming the Mana Core, which causes a powerful explosion in the house. At this moment, Reynolds jumps quickly to protect his wife from the explosion. Alice remembers that Arthur is still in the house, but is surprised by Reynolds' smiling reaction. She soon understands why when Arthur emerges unharmed after finally forming his Mana Core. Arthur notices his house has turned to rubble. After Afterwards, they begin their attempts to rebuild the house. The parents start treating their child differently after this incident. His mother begins teaching him the basics of reading and writing, and his parents teach him the fundamentals of magic and physical training. However, he feels struggling with the training due to his small body size. Then comes the day when his father gives him a wooden sword on his 3rd birthday for training. Arthur discovers that mana power in this world is measured by magic, so it has colors. The mana core starts as black due to body blood and other impurities. Over time, as impurities are filtered out, the mana essence becomes purer and stronger, changing its stages from black to red, then orange, yellow, gray, and finally white, which is the strongest color. Each color stage is divided into 3 shades: dark, solid, and light. One day, while the family is having dinner, Reynolds decides to send Arthur to Xyrus City to train under a teacher there. However, Alice refuses this suggestion, not wanting to leave her only child to go alone to a city hundreds of miles away. After arguments between the parents, Arthur suggests that they move together as a family and live in the city. Alice and Reynolds strongly agree with his proposal, but Arthur is surprised when his parents tell him they'll be leaving for the city tomorrow, explaining that it happens that their friends are also going to Xyrus City, so they'll go together. The next morning, the family moves to the friends' gathering place. There, Reynolds asks his son to introduce himself. Arthur also meets the friends: Adam Crench, a mage specializing in spear use; Angela Rose, a conjurer specializing in wind magic; Durden Walker, a giant conjurer specializing in earth magic; Jasmine Flamesworth, an enhancer specializing in dual daggers; and Helen Shard, an enhancer specializing in archery magic. After introductions, they begin their journey to Xyrus City. At night, the adventure begins by hunting monsters, firstly to eat them, and secondly to clear the area so they can camp and rest to continue their journey tomorrow. The previous day, during the friends' gathering, Helen talks to Arthur and expresses her admiration for what he has accomplished despite his young age. Later, Adam excuses himself to train a bit before going to sleep. Reynolds suggests that he spar with Arthur. Arthur tries to avoid the confrontation by giving signals to his father and facial expressions saying he doesn't want to, but to no avail. He has no choice but to face the confrontation. The confrontation begins, and Arthur draws on his military experience from his previous life. The fight starts with Adam confident he can block attacks from a small child. However, Adam is surprised when Arthur suddenly disappears from in front of him and appears behind him, attacking amidst Adam's shock, who manages to dodge. The attack continues, but Arthur's small body is a weakness for him. He keeps trying until he manages to suddenly attack Adam and knock him to the ground. He moves to attack again, but Adam had understood his next move and managed to dodge it, knocking Arthur down. Adam seizes the opportunity and attacks with a strong blow. Although Arthur can dodge it, it pushes him back forcefully. At this point, the giant walker appears and hits Adam for Arthur because of his attempt to attack Arthur seriously. Adam justifies his behavior, saying he felt like he was fighting a real warrior. Afterwards, Walker asks Reynolds what kind of hellish training he used to make Arthur so skilled. Reynolds proudly replies that he didn't teach him any of those moves. Arthur tries to cover up the situation by telling them he learned it by watching his father and reading some books. Because of his skill, everyone asks him to teach them some of those moves. As days pass, they reach the city. Reynolds, Adam, and Helen excel in learning the moves Arthur taught them. But what really amazed him was Jasmine, who successfully learned some techniques. Their friendship developed to the point where she gave him a birthday gift, and throughout the journey, Jasmine kept asking him to teach her more and more of his techniques. Suddenly, on their way, they are attacked by a group of bandits. Each adventurer starts using their magic to fend off the bandits' attacks, but they find themselves completely surrounded from all directions. A group of bandits moves towards the wagons to take the belonging. Their leader orders them to kill everyone except for one woman, who was Alice, and the child. Reynolds attacks them, and while he's fighting one of them, an attacker sneaks up behind him, but Angela saves him at the last moment. On the other side, each adventurer was fighting the bandits, trying to get rid of them. Arthur, at this time, is thinking about how he can help despite his small body. But his thoughts are interrupted when he sees his father receive a severe blow from their leader, causing him injury. Alice runs to help her husband, but Arthur notices she can't use her magic with the promised strength. However, Reynolds assures them he's fine, and the injury isn't life-threatening. While Alice is treating him, Reynolds asks Arthur to take his mother away from here to the road they came from. He tells him to hurry, because as soon as his mother uses a healing wave, these men will go after her to capture her. He says he won't be able to deter their leader if he's worried about protecting both of them. Arthur tells his father that he can fight and won't leave him. His parents tell him they know he can fight, so they entrust him with protecting his mother. They surprise him with news that his mother is pregnant, which they were planning to tell him upon reaching the city. They urge him to hurry and protect her. Arthur promises his parents he will protect his mother and the unborn child. After Alice finishes treating Reynolds and they're about to escape, Reynolds warns his son to be careful, mentioning 4 mages from the bandits on the side. Arthur quickly takes his mother and flees, looking back at his father and saying to himself, "Don't die, Dad." As they're escaping, a mage attacks them, but Adam suddenly appears and tells them to continue their path while he handles the mage. Another mage appears and shoots an arrow from afar towards Arthur and his mother, but Arthur bravely deflects it with his wooden sword, surprising the mage with a small child's ability to block such an attack. Arthur continues on, remembering his father's warning about more mages. He wonders where the others are when he's suddenly confronted by one on a high rock, preparing a large mana vortex. Arthur considers countering with his own mana, but realizes that even if he dodges, his mother won't be fast enough, so he opts for a direct attack. A duel ensues, resulting in the mage falling from the high peak, with Arthur following behind. As he falls, Arthur feels sad, thinking he always wanted to be an older brother, but his end would be death. However, he considers this sacrifice for his mother and the unborn child. After some time, Arthur opens his eyes, surprised he's still alive, and wonders where he is. Due to the fall's impact, he feels dizzy and moves with difficulty. He finds some food on the ground and crawls to eat it, but quickly vomits it out. He then finds his knife embedded in the mage's corpse, pulls it out, and tries to move through the forest to figure out his location. Suddenly, he hears a voice asking, "Are you still alive?" Arthur quickly becomes alert, thinking it's an enemy, but sees no one except the mage's corpse when he looks behind. He wonders if the corpse is speaking. The voice appears again, saying, "Don't worry, the corpse hasn't come back to life." Arthur, pointing his weapon towards the voice, asks, "Who are you? Did you save me?" The voice replies, "Yes to your second question. As for your first, you'll find out when you reach my dwelling." Arthur asks why the voice is so confident he'll try to find them. The voice responds, "Because I'm the only one who can get you back home." Worried about his parents, Arthur asks if they're okay, and if they reached Xyrus safely. The voice says he'll know everything when he arrives. Arthur then asks, "Mr. Voice, can you give me directions to your dwelling?" The voice laughs and says, "Although it's incorrect to refer to a lady as Mr." Arthur starts moving and asks the voice about the type of magic she used to save him from falling, how she knew he would fall, and why she didn't save him earlier. On his way, he finds a lake. Excited, he takes off his clothes and jumps in, but he hears the voice and quickly gets out, embarrassed. He puts his clothes back on and continues. The voice reassures him that the forest is safe. Arthur believes her because he only sees small animals, and is surprised not to see any mana beasts despite the area's rich mana. He wishes he had time to stay and absorb some of this mana, but needs to leave quickly to check on his mother and the baby. Arthur finally reaches the voice's location, finding a rock. He thinks it's the source of the voice and talks to it, but the voice mocks him, telling him to look for cracks in the rock and enter the cave. He enters the cave, stumbles, and falls a great distance. When he opens his eyes, he's face to face with a huge black monster with red eyes. The monster says, "Finally, we meet." Arthur is shocked, and the lady tells him his mouth will break if he keeps it open like that. The black monster tells him it will take some time to open dimensional cracks large enough to send him home. Until then, he can stay in the cave and eat some of the plants there. Arthur thanks her and starts eating strange, shiny fruits. He asks her name, and she says it's Sylvia. Feeling less afraid, Arthur asks all the questions he's had since waking up. He asks where she came from, why she's alone, where this place is, and notices a wound on her body. He asks about it and why she saved him. Sylvia tells him this place is in a narrow area between the Monster's Nest and Elenoir Forest. She explains there are no people here because she used to get rid of anyone who approached, and this is the first time someone has entered. Arthur feels more at ease and tells her his family calls him Arth for short, and she can use that name too. Sylvia agrees to answer Arthur's questions. She tells him she's alone because no one from her family is left. She has many enemies who desperately want something she possesses. She points to her wound, explaining it's from her last battle with her enemies. She says she saved him because she was impressed by his bravery and sacrifice. Later, she apologizes and leaves, saying she can't stay awake at night because her wound is infected. She needs to be in good condition to work on the dimensional cracks the next day. Before leaving, she tells Arthur his family is safe. Arthur is overjoyed and thanks her for the news. Arthur spends hours talking with Sylvia about various topics during her free time when she's not working on the dimensional hole. These hours turn into days, and days into weeks, each moment building their friendship. While Sylvia never talks about her personal life, Arthur slowly begins to understand this mysterious creature. She embodies the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover." Despite her shocking appearance, she's kind, gentle, and warm, reminding Arthur of his mother's tenderness when feeding him. Suddenly, Arthur remembers the bandits who attacked them and says they deserve the worst death if any are still alive. Because of his anger, Sylvia hits him with her hand. Arthur asks why she did that. Sylvia replies, "Maybe you're not wrong. These thieves might deserve death, but allowing clouds of hatred and revenge to cover your heart will only harm you. Instead, continue your life. Look ahead with pride. You'll face troubles again, but don't let sadness and anger corrupt your mind. learn from them, and face the future with a smile. Arthur tells her that her wound seems to be getting worse. She responds, "Don't worry, little one. This wound flares up from time to time." Then she asks, surprised, "I know humans usually awaken their mana power at 12 or 13, but you awakened early." Arthur proudly replies, "My parents say I'm a genius." Sylvia then performs a trick, releasing a lot of mana from her body. She tells him he might learn to use it someday. Arthur is amazed and tries to copy her but fails, saying, "Easier said than done." She explains that it's different for mana beasts who learn this naturally, while humans awaken their power much later because their bodies can't multitask like this. But this doesn't apply to Arthur. With enough practice, he should be able to succeed. Arthur tries again, but fails. He understands that mastering this skill to its fullest means being able to fight skillfully while maintaining internal mana flow. Arthur tries repeatedly until he finally succeeds. He turns to Sylvia, happy, but finds her on the ground, covered in blood. He approaches her, crying and calling out, but she tells him not to worry. He says, "How can I not worry when you're dying for me?" She then says her name really suits this place. Suddenly, she transforms into a dragon, shocking Arthur. He asks, "Sylvia, you're a dragon?" She replies, "Yes, I suppose that's what humans call us, but we have little time now. In this form, we can't waste time on useless chatter. I'll open the portal now, but I don't have enough time to send you directly home. I'll send you to a place near humans." Arthur asks, "Just like that? I'll leave you?" Sylvia urges him to hurry, saying, "They will arrive soon after she removes the barrier." Arthur asks who they are. Suddenly, there's an impact in the cave. Sylvia carries Arthur, and a strange voice similar to Sylvia's old form says, "Lady Sylvia, I advise you to stop your stubbornness and hand him over." Sylvia ignores the voice and confesses to Arthur that she intentionally prolonged the transfer waves to spend more time with him. She asks if he can call her grandma just once before they part. Arthur cries, saying they can leave together, but Sylvia says she can't. She gives him a message in the form of a colorful egg filled with energy, implanting it in his chest. She tells him to explore it at the right time, then pushes him into the portal. As he calls out, "No, Grandma!" Sylvia bids him a final farewell, saying, "My child." Arthur wakes up crying on the ground because Sylvia left him. He shouts about her departure and tells himself that she treated him like family and taught him a lot. Suddenly, Arthur hears Sylvia's voice saying she'll give him a small farewell gift. She explains that she planted her unique will in him, and his future development as a wizard depends on how well he uses her gift. Arthur thinks this is useless now, but Sylvia reminds him that he has a family looking for him and a purpose in life. She gives him an oval scroll and says that when his mana core forms after the white stage, he'll hear from her again. She'll explain everything then. As she leaves, she says, "Goodbye, King Grey." Arthur wonders how long she's known his identity. Arthur then starts exploring to figure out where he is. He climbs a tree to get a better view, and realizes he's deep in the Elshire forest. He moves quickly through the trees using the mana rotation Sylvia taught him. Suddenly, he sees a carriage pulled by humans. He's happy to find people and wants to ask for help, but he's shocked to learn they're slave traders with a kidnapped girl. He overhears one of them saying the girl is young and will fetch a good price. Arthur decides he must rescue her, even though he badly wants to return to his family quickly. Knowing that confronting them directly would be suicide, Arthur follows them to their camp. He gathers mana strength and plans to attack when their guard is down. He throws a piece of fruit to distract the traders' dogs. When the dogs bark loudly, the traders try to quiet them to avoid waking the forest animals. As one trader goes to silence the dogs, Arthur uses a new technique. He uses his mana-charged hand as a weapon, attacks the trader, and cuts his throat. He takes a knife from him, jumps on the other trader, and stabs him in the neck, killing him. Arthur starts feeling tired because fighting is more difficult in his small body. He pushes himself to keep going and quickly deal with the other traders. He manages to defeat them and saves the young girl, who turns out to be an elf. She thanks him for what he did. Arthur says goodbye to leave and search for his family, but the girl stops him. She clings to him, scared, saying her parents told her that small children would be eaten by dogs or forest monsters if left alone. Arthur impatiently asks if she knows how long it will take to reach her home. She says she doesn't know. Arthur tells her he'll gather supplies, thinking the journey might be longer than expected. He hopes the elves might have a way to help him return to the human kingdom. He gives her some clothes to wear because it's cold, and says with a smile, "Let's get you home." On their way, Arthur asks her name. She replies, "Tessia Erelith." She asks his name too, and he answers. He then asks why she was lost in the forest. Tessia explains that she got separated from her family while visiting the human world. When they get hungry, Arthur hunts a rabbit. Tessia looks disgusted. She asks what happened to the traders who kidnapped her. Arthur replies that they had an unfortunate accident. Scared, she asks if they'll come looking for her again. Arthur promises she'll never see them again. Tessia thanks him. Arthur sets up a tent. Tessia goes inside to sleep and asks if he's coming to sleep too. He tells her not to worry and that he'll stay outside to guard. Arthur uses this time to explore the will Sylvia left him. Suddenly, Tessia comes out and suggests he come inside. She says monsters will appear more if they notice a child outside. Arthur has no choice but to enter the tent. Tessia falls asleep holding onto Arthur's clothes. He realizes she was afraid to sleep alone. The next morning, Arthur and Tessia continue their journey. However, Arthur experiences terrible pain from his mana core, making the trip unbearable. Arthur suddenly collapses, worrying Tessia. She asks if he's okay, and he says he's fine. The pain grows worse each day. As time passes, Tessia begins to recognize her surroundings more. They slow down because Tessia can't handle continuous travel. Arthur thinks to himself that despite his body being strengthened by mana, the pain keeps growing to the point he can't hide it from the worried elf girl. They rest in the tent and continue their journey the next day. Tessia suggests calling Arthur Art like his family does, since they've become close friends. Arthur smiles and agrees. One day, Tessia excitedly shouts that they've arrived at her home. She encourages Arthur to come in with her. As Arthur approaches, he finds the place very primitive. Suddenly, people arrive, welcoming Tessia back. One of them, bowing, says, "Princess, we came as soon as we noticed the royal teleportation gate was used." Arthur is surprised to hear Tessia called a princess. Tessia's parents appear, King Alduin Erelith of Elenoir and Queen Mariel Erelith, looking worried. Virian Erelith, Tessia's grandfather and former king of Elenoir, also appears. He's famous in history books for leading the last war against humans in the Sapang Kingdom. Arthur gently pushes Tessia towards her parents for a hug. Tessia's father thanks Arthur, saying, "Thank you, child, not just as the king of Elenoir, but as this little one's father." He invites Arthur to come home with them to rest, and then tell them what happened. Arthur notices that despite the father's kind tone, his eyes show it's an order, not an offer. Before Arthur can answer, Tessia's hand suddenly pulls him inside, saying, "Let's go. There's so much I want to show you." Arthur enters and asks to explain what happened first. They take him to the meeting room. Arthur starts by introducing himself, saying he's from a modest kingdom called Sapin. He says it's an honor to be in the presence of the royal family. King Alduin says, "Although you claim to be from humble origins, you seem very mature and well-educated, Arthur Lewin. I'm eager to hear what happened." Arthur begins telling his story, from getting separated from his family to encountering the slave traders who kidnapped their daughter. The king shouts, "Slave traders! I should have known it was humans." Arthur replies, "They were a group of individuals, not an entire race, your majesty." The soldiers draw their swords at Arthur, objecting to how he speaks to the king, but grandfather Virian stops them. Virian asks Arthur, "So when you saw my granddaughter taken by these slave traders, what did you as a child do? Did you negotiate? Did you beg?" Arthur answers, "I eliminated them and rescued your granddaughter. I may be a child, but I'm also a mage." The guards get angry again, saying, "How dare you lie in the king's presence?" Arthur stands up from the table, saying he doesn't care if they believe him or not. All he wants now is to return to his family in Sapan. Tessia tries to hold on to him, but Arthur tells her his priority is to make sure his family is okay and let them know he's fine too. Tessia's parents suggest giving him a gift for saving their daughter. Despite the differences between the kingdoms, he worked hard to bring her home safely. Unfortunately for Arthur, he knows the portal only opens every 7 years for the interracial summit, and there are still 5 years until it opens. The king says, "We'd like a group to accompany you home safely. Many still hold grudges against humans because of the war long ago." The king tells Arthur to consider himself at home for now, and by tomorrow morning, he'll have some escorts ready. Later, Arthur goes to his room, and the pain in his chest increases again. Then he hears someone knocking on the door. It's Tessia. She enters, angry at him for wanting to leave so quickly. She tells him he's the only friend she's ever had. Arthur smiles and says to her, "Crying princess, why don't you show me the castle?" Tessia takes Arthur on a tour of the castle. Suddenly, Tessia's grandfather appears and throws a fake knife at her. Arthur quickly catches it and attacks the grandfather, not knowing who he is. When Arthur realizes who it is, he says, "What the hell? Did you just try to kill your granddaughter?" But he discovers from the grandfather that it was a fake knife. The grandfather shows great admiration for Arthur. He says, "Now I can understand how you dealt with those slave traders. I can now believe your story." The grandfather adds, "It's been a while since I met someone so interesting." Then the grandfather throws a wooden sword towards Arthur, who immediately grabs it and attacks the grandfather, trying to reach his neck. But the grandfather manages to avoid his attack, commenting, "What a scary boy you are." Arthur attacks for the second time, and the grandfather avoids his attacks again. Then the grandfather attacks him, but Arthur manages to dodge the attack, which causes the grandfather some pain. Arthur increases the speed of his attack and uses his mana, but in the end, it wasn't enough to match the grandfather's speed. The grandfather continues facing Arthur without taking him seriously, but at the end of the fight, he's surprised to find a scratch on his forehead from Arthur's attack after being knocked down. He says to himself that this is fair, and he deserves it for being arrogant and underestimating Arthur's abilities. The grandfather asks Arthur to get up for a second round, but Tessia stops her grandfather and asks him to stop bullying Arthur. She says he should go easy on him, but the grandfather replies that if he had gone easy, he might have been the one bullied. Then the grandfather turns to Arthur and says, "Be my student." Arthur is surprised and says, "But first of all, I'm human. Are humans even allowed to stay here in the kingdom?" The grandfather replies that he's serious about his offer, and no one would dare to kick him out of the kingdom while under his care. He continues, "You already know you're better than other children, even better than some adults. But to let you know, I can teach you things that even the most talented mages in Sapin can't teach you. Arthur replies that all he's worried about now is not knowing if his parents are alive or dead. The grandfather says, okay, but if I made you try to contact them to make sure they're okay and let them know you're okay too, would that be enough? Later, the grandfather takes Arthur away from Tessia and says, I noticed you've been having episodes of burning pain, right? And these episodes come frequently. Arthur is surprised that the grandfather knows about his pain and asks, how did you know that? The grandfather replies, don't worry about how I knew, but first we need to know the cause of this pain. Do you even know what beast will is? Arthur remembers hearing this term before, when Sylvia put something in his manicore. The grandfather continues saying, what you're feeling is beast will. This means you got it from a beast strong enough to be classified as category E or higher. Beast will acquisitions are divided into levels. E is the lowest, then C, B, A, S, and finally SS. The grandfather tells him, I won't ask how you got this powerful will, but at this stage, the power inside your body is hurting you more than helping you. Arthur is amazed by what he hears from the grandfather and thinks that the grandfather must be the best at having beast will inside him. The grandfather replies that he also has beast will and is called a beast tamer, a title earned when someone conquers the beast will inside them. He continues, I know how important it is for you to return to your family, but doing that now would be very risky. The beast will inside you is too strong for your young body to handle. If you don't control it soon, the power you've gained will destroy your body from the inside out. The next morning, Tessia goes to wake Arthur up for training. She asks if it's true that he'll stay here, saying her grandfather told her this news this morning. Arthur replies that he'll know the answer to this question after their trip with grandfather Virion. Arthur gets ready to leave with the grandfather, who was standing with his son, the king. The king is surprised that his father allows a human child in the kingdom despite the rules. But grandfather Virion answers that Arthur is his student, and he won't let anyone come near him. The king trusts his father and just agrees before leaving on his journey. The grandfather asks Arthur to get in the carriage so they can start their trip. On their way, Tessia falls asleep on Arthur's shoulder. The grandfather says, Tessia woke up very early today and asked about you. Being the only princess of this kingdom caused her to grow up lonely. She's been hurt a lot by both adults and children pretending to be her friends. In the end, she became cold and built walls around herself. I haven't seen a smile on her face for years until the short time she spent with you. Finally, they arrive at their destination, a house. They wonder who this mysterious friend is that makes the king come all this way to this rural area. The king knocks on the door and an old lady opens it. He introduces her as Rinia Darkson, an old friend with a very special ability who can help Arthur check on his family. Arthur talks to her, saying the grandfather told him she could help him reach his family. The old woman tells him he has special abilities. She then tells him to focus on the image of his parents as much as possible, and then look into a water basin. Once he sees them in the basin, Arthur will be able to communicate with them and tell them he's still alive, and they can check on him. Arthur concentrates on his parents' features and looks deeply into the basin. He then sees his parents in their new home. His mother looks sad as she prepares Arthur and his father's favorite dish. Suddenly, both Alice and Reynolds hear Arthur's voice in their heads saying, "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad." The parents are surprised. Arthur tells them he'll explain later how they can hear his voice. He informs them that he's alive and safe, that he survived, and that he's currently staying in the Elven Kingdom of Elenoir, which must remain secret. He continues, saying he knows it's been hard for them, but they shouldn't blame themselves. He's proud of what he did then and would do it again if he went back in time. He adds that returning to them now would be very difficult because he seems to have a kind of illness he needs to treat first. He's not sure when he'll be able to talk to them again. He tells them there's a special mage here like his mother who made it possible for him to talk to them. He tells his father that he'll continue training and practicing magic while he recovers, and says, "Don't be surprised if I defeat you the next time I meet you." We know that after Arthur's fall and the end of the battle, Alice and Reynolds stand in disbelief at what happened to their child. Their friends try to comfort them despite their own sadness for Arthur. Reynolds and Alice then move to Xyrus City, where Reynolds works as head of security in one of the city's largest places. Before Arthur bids them farewell, he asks his father to take care of his mother and the child. He says goodbye, telling them to take care of themselves until he returns. Arthur then stands up, crying, and tells the grandfather he's ready now. He returns to the kingdom again, where Tessia's parents welcome him back. They say they're grateful for saving their daughter and beg him to accept their apology and consider this place his home. Suddenly, Tessia appears and tells her father that if he's truly sorry for what he did to Arthur, he should allow them to go out and show Arthur around the city. Tessia takes Arthur on a tour of the city. Suddenly, a group of children appears, and one of them tells Tessia that despite his respect for her, accompanying this common human will lower her status. He offers to accompany her instead, introducing himself as Faerith Ivsar, a genius who awakened his mana early. Arthur mocks him and leaves with Tessia. but the child stops him and because of Arthur's mockery, challenges him to a duel to regain his honor. Tessia warns him, asking if he dares to challenge Grandfather Virian's student, but the child insists on the duel, saying he's defending his family's pride. He tells Arthur to either accept the duel like a man or run away like a coward. The boy takes Arthur's silence as agreement and attacks Arthur, saying, "Prepare yourself, human called Arthur. This genius will show you." But the boy is surprised when Arthur knocks him down with a single blow, much to Tessia's delight. Arthur returns to the castle, and the grandfather tells him, "I don't know how you were taught before, but be sure that my lessons won't be easy. Even your daily life will be tough. But if you can endure, the results will be tremendous." Days pass, and the grandfather trains Arthur non-stop. After 3 years, we see Tessia trying to wake Arthur up using mana, twisting his ankle. Arthur wakes up startled, asking her to use a better method to wake him up. Tessia replies that it's not her fault he didn't wake up when she tried gentler methods. Tessia gets angry when Arthur tells her on their way to the grandfather that he admires the maids in the house. They arrive at the lesson place with the grandfather waiting. He begins the lesson, saying there are 4 basic elements: ice, gravity, lightning, and sound. He continues that these can only be controlled by a mage who has mastered the 4 primary elements. As for the dwarves, they can manipulate only earth and fire elements. They're like the elves, with their distinctive feature being their ability to shape metal as they wish. Gifted dwarves can control earth and fire to a high degree, and can summon and manipulate magma. In rare cases, elves can also have special abilities like controlling plants. However, elves can't possess magic that can manipulate elements higher than water, wind, and earth. Humans have the ability to manipulate any of the 4 basic elements. They're the only race that can have mages specialized in any of these 4 elements, in addition to special cases that can't be classified in any of the basic elements, such as conjurers or healers, for example. Nevertheless, there is a balance of power between the 3 races. After the lesson, both Arthur and especially Tessia feel tired. Tessia asks the grandfather, saying she knows the absorption process is to make Arthur proficient in taming the beast within him. She wonders if it wouldn't be better for him to train physically while using magic like her. The grandfather tells her that what Arthur has been doing for the past 3 years is integrating his bones, muscles, and organs with his mana. This was in preparation for physical training, and he's sure that once he's finished, Arthur will become stronger and more flexible than a veteran warrior. The grandfather tells Arthur that from today on, he will be a real beast tamer, unlike those lucky adventurers who simply use their beast's will as tools. After that, the grandfather pumps some of the beast's will into Arthur's chest from his own mana to ignite Arthur's mana core. This causes Arthur to fall due to severe pain. The grandfather asks Arthur, saying he knows his reasons for not telling him, but he asks again what kind of beast gave him its will. Arthur tells him it was a dragon. This surprises the grandfather, making him incredulous, repeating, "My God, he's a real dragon tamer. I've trained a real tamer." The next morning, Arthur wakes up and finds the grandfather beside him. He tells him, "I can trust you to keep the secret even after I leave." The grandfather informs Arthur that his departure date is now 4 months from now. Arthur is surprised, as he thought it would be 2 years. The grandfather explains that the interracial tournament for youth between the 3 kingdoms, which was being prepared for a while, has finally been confirmed. The gates in Xyrus City and Sapan will open for both Elenoir and Darv kingdoms in 4 months, so Arthur can return to his family again. Arthur thinks about Tessia and her sadness at his departure. The grandfather tells him their upcoming training will become more difficult, and assures Arthur he'll inform Tessia about his departure gently. Later, Arthur finds the egg Sylvia gave him has cracked. A small dragon emerges, which he names Sylvia after its mother. The dragon bites him, leaving a mark on his arm indicating its love and connection to him. Tessia enters and is amazed by the dragon. Outside, she tries to communicate with the small dragon but can't. Arthur explains he can communicate with it mentally. The grandfather sees the small dragon and tells Arthur he'll die early from the shocks Arthur gives him. Arthur explains where Sylvia came from. The grandfather says creatures like Sylvia only hatch in the presence of their kin, and once Arthur tamed the dragon inside him, the egg hatched. Arthur asks if he should hide her when he returns, but the grandfather says it's okay, and he can pretend she's a rare mana beast. The grandfather explains that Arthur's training goal was to strengthen his mana core during absorption. Now that he's fully awakened it, they need to train both his mana core and the new dragon's will through a 2-phase training process. The first phase is called the acquisition phase. It's the stage where beast tamers can borrow the inherited power of the beast. The second phase is the integration phase. In this phase, the mage can truly benefit from the unique abilities and characteristics of the beasts. The grandfather now has the super speed of a shadow panther, and he can use it too. The grandfather's appearance changes to look like a beast. He moves, telling Arthur, "Watch as I sneak up behind you." Arthur doesn't know how the grandfather will sneak up on him after warning him. In the blink of an eye, before Arthur realizes what happened, the grandfather sneaks up behind him and grabs his shoulder. Arthur then says, "I give up. I can't even keep up with your speed at this level." The grandfather, after returning to his normal form, tells Arthur that there's no power without flaws, and using the integration phase is still tiring for him. Arthur praises the grandfather's speed. The grandfather explains that shadow panthers can instinctively manipulate wind and sound to achieve this. Then the grandfather asks, "How about we start the real training now?" The training to tame the beast will inside Arthur begins. After 4 months, he finally manages to awaken the first level of beast will taming, the ability to hide it from other mages. When it's time for him to return home, Arthur bids farewell to Tessia, who is crying. He gives her a watch as a memento. Then he boards the carriage that will take him to Xyrus City. He arrives at the city and stands in front of his house. He knocks on the door, remembering the past years, losing his parents and friends, and his memories with Sylvia. Arthur is happy that he'll finally be able to see his parents again. When the door opens, an old maid greets him with a small child behind her. Then his mother appears, preparing food which falls from her hands when she sees Arthur. His father runs quickly towards him and hugs him. They cry and are happy at the same time. Afterwards, Arthur begins to tell them everything that happened to him, from falling off the mountain to going to the elves' castle. Of course, he hides the story of Sylvia and tells them that the small animal with him is a rare mana beast, which makes him feel bad for not telling his parents the whole truth. Then he greets his little sister and gets to know her. He learns that her name is Elenoir. After that, his father boasts to him that he spent the last 2 years training until he reached the dark orange color in his mana core. What really amazes Reynolds is when Arthur tells him that he has nearly reached his level and that he has achieved the red color. So his father challenges him to a fight outside the house. At this moment, the house owners who are staying there, Vincent, Tabitha, and their daughter Lilia, who is Arthur's age, arrive. They are surprised that as soon as the son returns home, he and his father are having a duel. Everyone goes out to watch the duel in the house garden. Both Arthur and Reynolds prepare. They both start attacking each other without using magic to gauge the other's strength. Reynolds confirms that his son's level has increased and tells his son that he's surprised by his strength. From now on, the fight will become serious. Then Reynolds uses his orange mana core, which manifests as firepower. On the other side, Arthur is ready. He can use all 4 elements due to the advantages he gained in his previous life. They both attack, and Arthur uses lightning magic to attack his father with amazing speed that Reynolds couldn't avoid, but managed to block in the end. Then they both punch each other, causing an explosion in the house garden. At this point, the fight ends with Reynolds showing signs of pride in his son. On the other side, all family members show signs of amazement, especially Vincent, who can't believe that a child of this age can do what adults can't. Afterwards, they gather at the dining table. Vincent tries to convince Reynolds to enroll Arthur in Xyrus Academy, offering to cover all of Arthur's education expenses. However, Arthur feels uncomfortable and asks them to postpone this matter because he misses his family and wants to spend some time with them, especially after being away for so long. He'll decide then whether he wants to go or not. The next day, the family goes to the market to buy some clothes for Arthur and as an opportunity for him to get to know his sister better. In the market, Arthur discovers that Vincent's family owns the most important auction house in the city and that his father has become the head of security there. On the way back, Arthur notices a group of people watching him in disguise. One of them tells the other to inform Lord Sebastian that the rare mana beast is not with him. Later, Arthur learns about Xyrus Academy. Only the most talented mages can attend and register at the academy because it consistently produces the best teachers and army leaders. It's the best magical academy on the entire continent. Its director is called Good Sky, and thanks to Vincent's connections with her, he was able to arrange for her to evaluate Arthur's performance herself. Indeed, when Arthur returns home, he finds that the director has come to evaluate his performance. They go out to the house garden for the test. By this time, Arthur's abilities have started to grow through using his skills from his previous life, and also with the help of Grandpa Virian's training, he has mastered the use of the 4 elements. Arthur begins attacking the director by breaking garden tiles and throwing them at her. She deflects these tiles using wind power. Then Arthur attacks her using wind as well. At the moment, he thought he had broken through her defense. She attacked him with wind shots that caused him to jump a long distance. He tries to attack again, but she creates some tornadoes. However, he manages to break through them, to the director's surprise. She then decides to end the fight by using sound power to make him lose consciousness, but he resists the spell and remains conscious. At this point, she realizes he can use all 4 basic elements, and the test ends. She tells his father that he passed the test and that he could become the greatest mage in the future. Afterwards, Arthur tries to make a deal with her privately. He tells her he showed her all his abilities because he wants her to protect his family until he becomes strong enough to protect them himself. In return, he will repay the debt in the future after 3 years because he wants to be an adventurer for now. However, his mother refuses because she doesn't want him to be away for another 3 years. But Reynolds convinces her to accept and sets 3 conditions for his agreement. First, they will wait until his birthday, which is 3 months from now. Second, they will provide him with a guard who will stay with him on all missions. Lastly, they must visit them at least every 2 months. He tells her to let him go as an adventurer with their friends who will visit them in 2 months at most. Arthur then goes to Vincent to ask him to prepare some equipment for him, such as a hooded cloak, a sword he can use, and a mask through which he can change his voice. He tells Vincent that in return, he will help his daughter awaken her mana power, knowing this is Vincent's hope, especially since he and his wife are not mages. Vincent immediately agrees without hesitation and is overjoyed, but Arthur's parents scold him for promising Vincent something he won't be able to do. However, Arthur reassures them. Arthur then begins training Lilia and his sister at the same time, explaining to their parents that awakening their mana might take a few years. After 2 months, his parents' friends, the Twin Horns group, arrive. They are happy to see Arthur, crying as they remember the incident and his loss, but they are glad he's back again. They then begin preparing to go to the auction, where extremely valuable items will be displayed. Arthur learns that his father's friends came to help secure these items. Upon arrival, Arthur is amazed by the size and grandeur of the auction hall. This event is attended by city dignitaries and nobles. Arthur is surprised to learn that among the attendees are King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla Glader, their son Prince Curtis, their daughter Princess Kathleen, and with them the royal court guard, Lord Sebastian, who can't take his eyes off Sylvia. He envies Arthur for possessing such a rare beast, and is focused on how to obtain this beast from him. The auction begins, and some valuable antiques are presented. The king is among the bidders and buys some antiques. At this time, Vincent asks Arthur to tell him if he wants to get any of those items. After a while, Arthur notices Sylvia's disappearance and starts looking for her, but he finds that the royal guard is trying to take her by force. When Arthur confronts him, Lord Sebastian coldly tells him that he will possess this creature one way or another. After the auction ends, Lord Sebastian goes to the king and asks him to obtain this rare beast from Arthur. However, the king asks Vincent to bring Arthur's father and personally requests to take Sylvia. Reynolds comes immediately upon the king's request. The king asks him to give his son's mana beast to gift it to the royal court mage as a reward for his efforts over the years. Reynolds replies that he doesn't know how his son obtained this beast, and only he can decide whether he wants to give up his beast or not. The king asks Arthur to give him the beast, but Arthur politely refuses, saying he can't part with it. Even after the king's attempt to exchange Sylvia for a high-quality mana beast he bought, Arthur politely refuses for the second time. At this point, the king loses patience and tells him that he asked nicely the last time, but this time it's a royal order. Arthur then responds by asking the king a question. At what price are you willing to sell your children? Everyone is surprised by Arthur's response, and the king's soldiers begin to attack Arthur, but he dodges the blows and takes down each one with a single strike. Then the court guard attacks Arthur with a close-range spell. Arthur uses a technique that separates him from the flow of time and activates the first level of Beast Will. In a single moment, at lightning speed, he attacks the Lord and breaks his leg. The Lord tries to call for help, but no one can hear him except Arthur. When the flow ends, others are surprised to see Arthur attacking the soldiers and couldn't see his attack on the Lord due to the speed of time. They are shocked to find the Lord's leg broken without knowing how it happened. Afterwards, Arthur falls unconscious due to using that technique. Arthur wakes up the next day in his bed at home, not knowing how he got there. He hears his mother enter to check on him and she tells him he's been unconscious for 8 hours and they were worried about him. He learns from her that the king's secretary is in their house, received by his father. Arthur insists on attending this meeting. Upon entering, the secretary tells him that the king has sent him a gift, a sum of money as an apology for what happened at the auction. They will tell the public that the guards stopped the mage's attack, which led to his leg being broken. Arthur asks about the Lord's fate, and the secretary informs him that he has been dismissed from his position. The secretary then excuses himself to leave and gives him the money gifted by the king, saying it's rightfully his. Arthur is happy with the money because he will use it on his journey as an adventurer. Then, the friends gather with the family to decide who will accompany Arthur on his journey as an adventurer. Jasmine raises her hand to accompany him. Arthur starts preparing his belongings and goes to Vincent to choose the sword he wants. He searches for a sword but doesn't find anything suitable. Then he sees Sylvia pulling a sword from under a table, but he fails to pull this sword out in all ways. He's forced to activate the first level of Beast Will and barely manages to pull the sword. He then chooses this sword to be his new one. The next day is Arthur's birthday. All present are happy with this occasion, and because of their gathering together. Arthur is the happiest of them all, remembering how lonely he was in his previous life, in contrast to his life in this world. Therefore, he vows to protect his family no matter what it costs him. Then Arthur prepares to leave, and his family is sad because of the short time he spent with them and his desire to leave again after a 3-year absence, but he promises them that he will return stronger and that he will visit them. Arthur's journey with Jasmine begins until they reach the Adventurers Guild to receive his license as an adventurer. There he meets the guild leader who is disguised with a mask and introduces himself as Note because he doesn't want anyone to know his true identity. Then Arthur goes to the testing area where duels are held to determine the level of adventurers. There, he's drawn to a group of people including Elijah, who obtained rank B without a test, and the arrogant Lucas, who also got rank B. Then it's Arthur's turn for the test, and he tries to prepare for it. Just before the test begins, Caspian, the guild leader and an A+ rank adventurer, interrupts them. He informs them that he will test Arthur himself, which excites Arthur due to Caspian's strength. The test begins, and they exchange sword strikes. Arthur notices he doesn't have an advantage because his muscles haven't developed, and he's shorter due to his small body, making it difficult to keep up with the attacks. Caspian tells himself he should apologize for underestimating Arthur. He informs Arthur that he'll get serious now, and starts using wind magic to reinforce his body with mana, launching wind shots at Arthur. Arthur initially dodges them with difficulty, but adapts to their speed. He not only avoids them, but also counterattacks using fire magic. This intensifies the fight, turning it from a mere test into a battle between beasts. After exchanging fierce blows, Caspian becomes agitated by Arthur's toughness and sharpness. He increases the speed of his shots through windstorms, but this time Arthur feels the pressure and increases his strength as the fight intensifies. When Caspian feels he's about to lose, he decides to unleash his full power, causing a large mana explosion. On the other side, Arthur also gets excited. Caspian is surprised to see Arthur ready to activate the lightning element, showing signs of seriousness. This forces Caspian to stop the test, telling Arthur he understands why he initially refrained from showing his true power, because he wanted to get a low rank. Therefore, he announces that Note has obtained rank B, amidst the astonishment of those present, amazed by his tremendous power. Caspian appears frustrated by his defeat to this child. Even the guild trainers were impressed by the number of B-rank candidates, more than in the past 4 months. Caspian then informs them that the king has lifted the ban on dwarves and elves, and they can now become adventurers without any problems to unite their forces and fight monsters. However, he asks them to refrain from discussing these matters with others until they are officially announced. In the elven forest, Tessia was recalling her memories with Arthur. She knew about Ursul's news through her magic crystal, and felt jealous because of his closeness to girls. She sleeps on her bed holding his picture. Suddenly, her grandfather enters to tell her good news. She has a chance to attend the same school as Arthur. Tessia gets excited and can't believe it, but he tells her that an agreement has been made between the 3 kingdoms to be present as one group. At this time, in the Adventurers Guild, Ursul was receiving his adventurer license before setting off on his first monster-slaying mission. Suddenly, Arthur hears someone verbally attacking him. It's the arrogant Lucas mocking him, but Elijah, the adventurer who got B rank without fighting, appears and stops Lucas, introducing himself to Arthur. Then Arthur prepares for his first mission. The first step was to separate from Sylvia, who is also training during this time until they meet again. Arthur and Jasmine's journey begins. On their way, they camp, and Arthur asks Jasmine why she wants to be an adventurer. She replies that she wanted to escape her family because they treated her badly due to her wind element affinity, as they're a family known for fire element affinity, considered the strongest of the 4 elements. Her words remind Arthur of his weakness in using Kai energy at the beginning of his previous life. They go to sleep, and Jasmine feels that when she talks to him, she feels comfortable as if talking to an adult, not a child. The next morning, Jasmine tells him that the real reason she came here was to fight him. She decided this after seeing Caspian's fight, noticing his strange fighting style at times, and inability to fully respond to all movements. Arthur thought about the same feeling due to his small size, unable to keep up with movements sometimes, despite being the best duelist in his previous life. Then he begins fighting with Jasmine, excluding the use of mana to enhance his body movements. He notices that because of his heavy reliance on mana, his physical movements are weak. So he decides to fight using only the sword without relying on mana, and he will dedicate 2 full years to this training to strengthen his physical movements. After 2 years, a rumor spreads among adventurers about a small mobile clearing one of the dungeons alone, causing him to rise from rank B to rank A, using only a sword. The adventurers didn't believe these rumors, but they were surprised when more entered the guild during their conversation. One day, an adventurer asks for more fighting, but Arthur ignores him and walks away. So, this adventurer decides to attack Arthur from behind, but he can't, because of Arthur's speed in blocking attacks. Suddenly, the adventurer screams because Arthur has cut off his fingers, causing tension and fear in the place. Afterward, Arthur leaves to clear another dungeon before returning to his guild. He remembers the time he spent in these 2 years training with Jasmine to strengthen his movements. During this time, Lilia had managed to awaken her mana core, leading to the joy of the Vincent family and their gratitude to Arthur for what he did. Arthur continues on his way until he reaches the group of adventurers who will enter the dungeon with him. There, he meets the arrogant Lucas, who doesn't like his presence presence, but he's happier when he meets Eli and knows he's joined them. Then the group leader introduces himself as Brold Landon, who has an A+ rank. They enter the dungeon and walk for several minutes without any monsters appearing. After a while, they find a group of bats on the dungeon ceiling. Landon orders them not to use any magic in attacking these monsters, but the arrogant Lucas doesn't comply and attacks the monsters with the fire element. The leader then goes to Lucas and reprimands him for not following his orders, warning of further action if he doesn't comply. They continue their way and find some cracks. Suddenly, a huge worm appears in front of them. An adventurer named Creole creates a water shield that blocks the worm's attack, causing it to disappear. They continue their way, and a wizard accompanying them named Oliver, who impressed one of the girls, decides to advance alone to examine the place. But Arthur notices something strange and asks Lucas to be careful. Before he can warn them, an explosion occurs in the place. The worm appears again, and everyone rushes to attack it, but it disappears again, causing another explosion. After that, everyone uses protection extension magic to protect themselves, but this doesn't prevent the leader from losing his arm due to the explosion. Afterward, the adventurers start shouting at Lucas because of his arrogance and lack of help, mocking him because Note was the one who saved him. Arthur then goes to him and tells him that he's a disgrace to this group and that he was the reason the leader lost his arm because he was late in implementing the protection shield. Then, Serge is chosen as their new leader after everyone agrees. They continue their journey until they reach a huge door. They manage to break it and find themselves in a strange environment full of flowers and plants, after being in a place surrounded by fire from all directions, which raises Arthur's suspicion due to the sudden change. A wave of fog appears, and Jasmine starts seeing illusions, as does Creole, who sees the ghost of his deceased wife. Arthur then activates a water barrier to protect them, and uses the wind element to eliminate the fog wave. Afterward, a group of monstrous plants appear and attack the adventurers, who begin to fend off these plants' attacks. No matter how much they try to cut them, they regenerate. Due to the illusion effect again, we see an adventurer named Brandy violently attacking the plants. One of the plants grabs him and wraps around him, but Arthur quickly rescues him and runs towards the group. Then Arthur gives a new set of orders, but finds no one interested. When he looks at them, he sees their gaze fixed upwards, with terror and fear on their faces. This was due to the appearance of a huge S-rank monster they had only seen before in monster books, called the Guardian of the Ancestors. They find Creole inside it after it killed him, which causes the adventurer Reynold to lose control due to his companion's fate. He rushes in a suicidal attack towards the Guardian monster and manages to cut off the monster's arm, leading to the monster attacking all the adventurers. The monster manages to grab Reynold as well, which leads Arthur to order an immediate retreat away from the monster to avoid losing more people. Everyone begins to obey Arthur's orders. At the moment, Arthur turns his back to ask Lucas to use the fire element to burn the monster so it releases Reynold. Lucas had already done so on his own and cast the magic spell. However, it was directed at Arthur instead of the monster, causing him to fall heavily to the ground. Jasmine runs towards him to save him, but Lucas blasts her as well. Lucas laughs, a smile spreading across his face, telling them he will use them all as bait for the monster so he can escape alone. Then the monster attacks Lage and kills him. At that moment, Brold rushes towards the monster, his face showing expressions of anger, and attacks it, but the monster is able to heal its wounds immediately. Anger then dominates Arthur's features, and he wants to use Sylvia's will within him, but in his current state, this could cause his death. We see Arthur getting up again and trying to stand on his feet, saying, "Damn fear, either I kill it or die trying." Then he activates the second level of the beast's will, and beast marks begin to appear on his body, turning his hair white. He starts using ice magic with his left hand repeatedly until he manages to freeze the monster. In his other hand, he gathers all the elements to form black lightning, which he launches at the frozen monster, making it disappear completely from existence. Afterward, he falls to the ground, bleeding from everywhere. Afterward, Arthur wakes up to find Elijah in front of him, who tells him that he managed to save him and Jasmine. Arthur asks Elijah to bring his bag and use healing magic on him and Jasmine, and indeed, both of them improve. After recovering, Arthur formally introduces himself to Elijah after his mask had fallen off, saying, "My name is Arthur Lewin," and tells Elijah that he can call him Art. They both start talking about themselves. Elijah says he grew up in the Dwarf Kingdom but was only raised there and doesn't know his true origins or real parents. He lived a normal life until the orange stage was awakened within him. His adoptive father told him that those who possess this energy are among the distinguished, and his ability is that he can shape metals. Then Arthur proudly tells that he's an augmenter and can use the 4 basic elements, and he has 2 deviant type elements, which are ice and lightning. Deviant, specialized in higher elements. This causes admiration and astonishment in Elijah as he listens to Arthur. After that, Jasmine wakes up and immediately starts crying and apologizing to Arthur because she couldn't save him for the second time. Arthur begins to calm her down. They then notice that no one else survived except for the 3 of them. However, Elijah uses the earth element to detect objects underneath, and they find Samantha unconscious. Suddenly, they hear thunder before Sylvia Sylvia appears before them, having grown much larger after defeating many monsters and consuming their cores. Although Arthur had told her not to come to rescue him, she knew he was in danger due to their mental connection. While she's with them, we don't see any monsters trying to attack them. Samantha wakes up, speaking with great difficulty before giving Arthur his mask and also the S-rank monster core. Arthur then suggests selling the monster core to split the money between them, but everyone refuses because he defeated the monster himself. Then he goes to Elijah and Jasmine to ask for help and stays with Samantha due to her health condition. After a while, everyone returns to the guild and only Brold's body is handed over. Then everyone begins to recount what happened before Lucas enters the place. At that point, both Jasmine and Elijah try to attack him, but Arthur stops them. Lucas then blames them for what happened, and here Arthur couldn't control himself at all from throwing his sword towards Lucas, resulting in cutting off his ear, and continues moving towards him, taking down the guards with a single blow. The guild leader then shouts at him to stop, but Arthur continues his speech, apologizing for his sword slipping from his hand, and then everyone leaves the room, but Arthur and the leader remain. The leader advises him not to kill Lucas because he's from the Wykes family, which is considered one of the strongest families in the kingdom. Even if they don't know his true identity, they would kill everyone associated with him like Jasmine or his father's adventurer friends. He also warns him about Lucas's half-brother, who is one of the strongest mages in the kingdom. Shortly after, the trial begins, in which Lucas is sentenced to only have his adventurer license revoked, due to his family's strong influence. However, Arthur is banned from entering Xyrus City, but only as note, so he won't have to reveal his identity to Lucas or others, which angers Lucas greatly. How would they know if Arthur is in the city or not? But the matter has already been ruled on, and then the judge takes Arthur and leads him out through the back door. At this point, we learn that he has made an agreement with the guild not to reveal his identity, and in return, he will help them if they need him at any time. When he comes out, he finds everyone waiting for him. He then learns that Elijah has nowhere to go until the academy studies begin, so Arthur offers him to come to his home, but Elijah refuses because he doesn't have the money or connections to enter the academy. Here, Arthur tells him that he will take care of all these matters himself on his behalf, before telling them to continue walking because he needs to do something. Caspian appears, and Arthur thanks him for his help. But the help isn't over, as Arthur throws Caspian a bag of coins so they can buy equipment, including a dimensional ring to hide his sword, and the S-rank monster core as well. After this, Arthur continues his journey towards his home, after finishing his adventure journey, which lasted for 2 full years. When he arrives there, he finds his little sister welcoming him very warmly, as well as his parents, who show signs of joy and happiness. His mother knew he was about to die because of the shared ring between them which she gave him before he went to the academy. Then everyone sits together, and Arthur and Elijah begin to tell them what happened in the last dungeon, amidst everyone's great astonishment when they learned that Arthur had defeated an S-rank monster alone. Then he gave the monster core to his father. Also, his father hadn't been able to develop his mana core since the last time. Days passed, and Arthur decided to put away the adventurer's mask so he wouldn't use it again. The next day, his father gives him the monster core after consuming all the money inside it. Arthur sees that there's still something inside, and then he finds that it's the monster itself. Arthur tries to absorb the monster's will, but Sylvia pushes him out from the inside. Then Arthur decides to look for someone to give it to. Days pass while Arthur trains with Elijah, and also spends time with his family. But the king announces an upcoming conference where important news will be announced. On their way to the castle, Vincent takes Arthur to the inventor Gideon, who wants to build a machine that crosses water. There, Arthur uses knowledge from his previous world, and designs a blueprint for making boats for Gideon. But he leaves out the essential parts which he'll only tell Gideon when he knows why they need these boats. However, Gideon refuses to tell him the reason, and offers Arthur 2 cores of the Fire Phoenix monster instead. Arthur accepts them, but still insists on asking. Gideon then reluctantly tells him that they've discovered the existence of another continent besides Dicathin, because they saw a device that was capturing moving pictures in the kingdom, which means the other continent has information about them, and they don't, which isn't good for them at all. After that, Arthur leaves him the complete blueprints. He then goes on his way to the king's castle with Elijah. On the way, he finds a group of bullies beating up a child from the dwarf kingdom. Elijah rushes to save him, but he's physically weak, and magic is forbidden outside the academy, so he gets bullied too. Arthur quickly intervenes and knocks them all down. One of the bullies then tries to use magic before the prince and princess arrive and stop the fight between them. The bullies then try to lie and blame Arthur for what happened, but Vincent intervenes and tells the princes what really happened. The situation becomes more complicated when we learn that one of the bullies is from the Trident family, which is considered one of the biggest supporters of the royal family, as well as Xyrus Academy. The prince then resorts to resolving the issue amicably without punishing the bullies, but Arthur communicates with the school principal, Good Sky, asking her to expel them all. In one moment, it's done, amid everyone's astonishment at what happened. After everyone reaches the city center, the king begins to announce the desire to unite the powers of the three kingdoms, and over time they will become one kingdom. He continues his speech by saying that they have discovered the existence of a new continent, which leaves the population confused. But to calm everyone down, he introduces the 6 pillars of the kingdom, who will protect the kingdom and are the strongest mages in the 3 kingdoms. However, when Arthur and Elijah hear the last name, which is Lucas's half-brother, they feel very uncomfortable, as they thought he was just a powerful mage, not one of the strongest mages in the entire kingdom. 4 months later, we see Arthur, who has developed a strong relationship with Gideon. Gideon gives him a gift to use in hiding 2 of his 4 elements. Gideon tells Arthur that the ship is about to sail, all thanks to him. Then Arthur returns home and finds that the school uniforms have already arrived. After a few days, school starts at the academy. Elijah enters to wake Arthur up so they can go to the academy early. Sylvia wakes up because of Elijah and starts attacking him. Due to all this noise, Arthur wakes up too, and then they set off for the academy. When they arrive there, they see that many students already have mana beasts. After that, everyone enters the academy building, where they register their magical elements. We then see signs of surprise on the hostess's face when she sees that Arthur can use 2 magical elements, after Arthur used Gideon's gift to hide the other 2 elements. Then, they all go to the conference hall, where they see Principal Good Sky giving a speech expressing her great happiness for having students of different races on the academy grounds finally. Then the principal introduces the new student council president, who turns out to be Tessia, and signs of happiness appear on Arthur and Sylvie's faces upon seeing her. Tessia then gives a speech calling on students not to discriminate against each other racially, but as soon as she finishes her speech, and as students are leaving the place, they see a human student bullying a dwarf, trying to provoke him into a duel. His plan succeeds, but we see the great difference in strength in favor of the human who quickly defeats the dwarf. But this wasn't enough for him, as we see him trying to break his arm as well. Amidst Elijah's attempt to intervene, Arthur interrupts him in a loud voice and calls for the student president, which greatly angers the bully who threatens to attack Arthur. But Arthur backs down from the fight because he doesn't want to draw attention to himself. The bully leaves before Sylvie spits on him, and then he tries to attack Arthur, but student council members arrive at the scene to stop the fight between them. Among them are Ellie and Tessia. The bully then tries to blame Arthur, but Tessia threatens that if he keeps lying, he'll be expelled from the academy. She then turns to reprimand Arthur as well, but he doesn't accept her words and tries to leave before another council member stops him. This member continues to reprimand him for treating Tessia poorly, but with one look, Arthur sends him flying through the air. On the night of the same day, Principal Good Sky visits them. Elijah leaves to let them talk privately. Good Sky then notices that Arthur is wearing an artifact that hides 2 of his elements. Arthur tells her that the reason for this is that the arrogant Lucas Wykes is studying at the same academy, and he doesn't want him to know his identity. Therefore, he has hidden both the fire and lightning elements. Then Arthur asks her to give him some privileges, the most important of which is letting him join the classes of students with distinguished magic. Elijah interrupts their conversation and scolds Arthur for speaking to the principal in that manner, but she embarrasses him and tells him that she doesn't mind Arthur's way of speaking to her at all, before telling Arthur that in order to join those classes, he must join the disciplinary committee consisting of the strongest mages who maintain order in this academy. Only then will he be allowed to go wherever he wants, whenever he wants. Arthur is then forced to agree to her offer, and at the same moment, she gives him the uniform for that committee before quickly leaving the place so he doesn't change his mind. But before she leaves, she tells Arthur to reconcile with Tessia, amid Elijah's astonishment, who started calling him the Princess Charmer. After that, Arthur and Elijah go to dinner, and we see all the students' eyes directed towards them. After they sit for a while, a group of students come and invite Elijah to join them in a bad way. Arthur mocks their group's name, which leads to their anger and attempt to attack him, but Arthur easily blocks the blow, which angers one of them more, and he tries to punch him again. Elijah stops him with his magic without even moving a finger. Arthur then takes the opportunity to insult the bully, and pulls down his pants in the middle of the dining hall, before leaving the place and meeting Tessia outside. She thanks him for his previous help, before silence prevails. Arthur doesn't know what to say in such situations, but he pulls himself together and starts apologizing to her for what he did. She apologizes to him too, but she shocks him with her head during this. After that, they start talking together before Elijah appears again, looking from afar at the Princess Charmer with eyes full of hatred and envy. Arthur then leaves the place with Tessia and begins to tell her about his life as an adventurer. She feels jealous of Jasmine for spending 2 years with him, ignoring a small detail, which is Lucas's attempt to kill them. Then Arthur gives her the S-rank monster core he had before bidding her farewell and leaving. The next morning, Arthur goes to meet the rest of the disciplinary committee members. When he opens the door, he's surprised by a tiger, but he doesn't move an inch, which impresses Kai. Kai Kai had planned to scare him with the mana beast. Kai then greets Arthur before we see first-year student Dorothea beside him. Without wasting any time, they take him to meet the rest of the committee students. There, Arthur meets Princess Curtis with the lion her father, the king, bought for her at the previous auction. Then Arthur meets more of his acquaintances, including Princess Kathleen and Xyrus, the elf he met when he was in the kingdom of Elenoir. Xyrus gets angry with Arthur when he reminds him of what happened to them before, but they are interrupted by the last members of the committee, Claire and Theo. Theo shakes Arthur's hand and tries to subdue him with gravity magic, but to everyone's surprise, Arthur doesn't budge an inch. They all then go to the conference hall where they are officially introduced as members of the disciplinary committee. Afterwards, Arthur attends his first lessons and realizes he knows everything being explained there since he studied magic books as a small child. He goes to the next class to find it resembles a fighting arena. While he's lost in thought, Kathleen interrupts him to sit next to him. After a few moments, Xyrus also appears and sits next to them. Just before the class begins, Arthur notices that he has seen this person before. The instructor, who is called Faye, also recognizes him and decides to insult Arthur and his committee by inviting them to fight. Arthur then thinks in amazement that no one would accept this fight unless they were a fool, but we quickly see this fool. It's none other than Xyrus, who quickly accepts the instructor's challenge. The fight begins, and the instructor sets up a barrier to protect the other students. Faye activates a water domain around him, which increases the speed of his water spell casting. Indeed, he gathers all his energy in his first attack and executes the water snake technique. However, the instructor easily counters it using a fireball that evaporates all the water and burns Faye's foot, causing him to surrender amidst the instructor's hate-filled gaze towards Arthur. Then Kathleen volunteers for the next fight. She starts with the ice spears technique, but the instructor vaporizes them all. She tries to outsmart him by attacking with smaller shots she had placed inside the ice spears. But she then realizes she used all her energy in the attack and neglected her defense. The instructor seizes the opportunity and attacks her with fireballs that almost cause her severe injuries. But Arthur quickly intervenes and saves her, declaring himself the instructor's next opponent. The instructor rushes towards Arthur with all his might. Arthur tries to block his attack and then launches towards the instructor. After exchanging blows, the instructor notices the intensity of the strikes and that the fight is becoming like a real battle. Arthur confirms the instructor's desire to hurt him and begins to take the fight seriously. He launches at the instructor, cornering him with one attack after another. The instructor barely manages to block them, but it pushes him back forcefully, causing him to hit the wall with nowhere to escape before Arthur knocks him unconscious with a storm of wind waves. Arthur quickly leaves for the next class, which is Fundamentals of Magic. There he meets a girl named Emily, who turns out to be the inventor of the devices that broadcast the Three Kings' speech throughout the continent. Then he learns that the news of his defeat of the instructor has spread throughout the school before their teacher enters. It turns out to be Gideon, who feigns surprise and ignorance that Arthur is in his class. Gideon then begins to waste class time talking about all his inventions, but his speech is interrupted by Good Sky's Mana Beast bird, which lands on Arthur's shoulder, allowing Gideon to let him go meet the principal. Indeed, Arthur goes to her office. As soon as he enters, he tries to explain what happened with the instructor, but she stops him, telling him she doesn't care what he did. She only wants him to become the temporary instructor for the same class until the other teacher recovers his health. Arthur then realizes that Kathleen must have suggested this. He continues talking, trying to avoid this situation, but she insists. Arthur finds no other way but to agree before leaving the place. Meanwhile, Good Sky and her beast watch him, with the beast telling her that Sylvia is actually a dragon and warning her not to anger Arthur or make him an enemy. Good Sky is surprised by this, as in the future, Arthur could indeed destroy the entire continent if he became their enemy. Before the next class begins, Arthur meets Curtis and Claire, and also sees Tess, but she ignores him due to feeling jealous of Claire, whom she sees as being very close to Arthur. Suddenly, Arthur's entire expression changes to intense anger as soon as he sees Lucas passing by. But the entry of the teacher, Glory, into the classroom interrupts his thoughts. She enters flying on her mana beast, and will be the teacher giving them combat lessons for the first stage. Arthur begins to examine her strength, but she notices this and starts doing the same. She notices that he's hiding his power, but sees that he can use two elements. She approaches him and draws attention to him by telling everyone that Arthur is their new teacher in the mana manipulation class, before suggesting a friendly fight between the disciplinary committee and the student council. But because it's a 3 versus 3 fight, they're short one person. At this point, Lucas volunteers to join them. As he prepares to start the fight, Tessia asks him about why he's hiding the rest of his elements. He tries to gently silence her, telling her to keep this secret secret to herself. Then the teacher announces the start of the 30-minute race, warning them that the protective clothing won't fully protect them, and the fight begins. We see Arthur preparing to attack Lucas, and after a few seconds, he launches towards him with great force. Despite Lucas's surprise, he casts a fire spell to block Arthur's attack and even counterattacks. We see Arthur trying to avoid the spell chasing him, but this is difficult for him as he's only using the wind element. He starts thinking of a solution to this situation, and finally comes up with a method to surround his body with wind magic. This will automatically repel the fire from him, but because the technique is still new, he suffers slight damage before passing through the fire, ready to finish off Lucas. But then Sylvie warns him of something important. She's learned that Tessia is in great danger. Amidst his distraction, Lucas attacks him with a powerful technique which Arthur barely counters before seeing the teacher running towards Tess, but he knows she's too slow and won't get there in time. Arthur begins to activate the first level of Beast Will amidst the severe pain he feels due to using too much mana in the previous fight. He then sees that Curtis has also activated Beast Will and has attacked Tess, but while she's trying to counter the attack, something happens that makes her lose consciousness for a few moments, unable to defend herself at all. When Arthur goes near her, he finds that he has exhausted all his mana, so he's unable to form a shield to protect her. But he then decides to sacrifice himself for her, embracing her with all his might while the fire burns his entire body. After a while, Arthur wakes up and sees Sylvie crying, saddened by what happened to him. Suddenly, Good Sky enters and tells him that Tessia is fine. Arthur interrupts her, explaining that the cause of what happened was the new mana beast that her body hasn't adapted to yet. He begins to blame himself, saying he should have told the teachers about this, as the period of adapting to Beast Will is one of the most difficult periods for any mage. Good Sky then thanks him for saving one of her students before leaving. When he opens his eyes again, he sees his family worried about him, but they try to comfort him. Soon after, Tess's family visits to check on Arthur, with the mother warmly welcoming her future daughter-in-law, Tess. Unfortunately, they are interrupted by many people who have come to visit Arthur as well. Some want to know what happened, like Professor Glory. Others want to apologize to him, and others just want to check on him. After they all leave, Gideon visits and tells him they've prepared a surprise for him in his private training room. The last visit is from Tess, who thanks him for what he did, and also apologizes. After several days, Arthur recovers and leaves the hospital. He's greeted by both Good Sky and Gideon, who shows him the surprise, a robot with the power of a mage with a yellow mana core. However, Arthur destroys it with one blow, much to Gideon's surprise, who promises to make something stronger for him. We then go to the bottom of Xyrus City, inside one of the undiscovered dungeons. We see Baron disposing of many large monsters with just one spell, and then he finds a strange emblem that he suspects belongs to one of the undiscovered kingdoms of the continent. 3 days later, Arthur trains with one of Gideon's machines before starting his first class as a substitute teacher. On his way there, he feels discouraged, not wanting to do this. But Kathleen thinks he's still tired and helps him get to the class. When they enter, the students are surprised. They see that their teacher is just a small child their age, and they start mocking him. One even challenges him to a fight, thinking that if he defeats Arthur, he can become a teacher too. We see the other students encouraging this talk, but then Arthur releases a small amount of mana, enough to silence everyone in the room. When the students calm down, Arthur begins to ask them about the difference between augmenters and conjurers in their use of mana. The students start to answer, but he doesn't stop at just asking. He calls 3 augmenters and 3 conjurers and asks them to cast a spell. Then he tells them to try to cancel that spell. They're surprised by what he's asking, as everyone knows that once a spell is cast, it can't be cancelled. But he amazes them even more when he starts casting wind magic, making the spell cancel itself before hitting anything. Everyone starts trying, but they all fail except for Kathleen, who came very close to canceling her spell. After the class, we see great enthusiasm on everyone's faces as they want to try this technique. Kathleen then goes to meet Arthur and starts apologizing for what her father did at the public auction when they were young. She had wanted to apologize since then, but never had the chance. Arthur tells her not to worry about it before leaving for the next class, which he finishes in the blink of an eye. At that moment, Elijah arrives running and tells Arthur that the principal wants to talk to him. He finds Tessia there in the training room, trying to ignore him, embarrassed after what happened between them in the hospital. We then learn that the principal called Arthur to help Tessia control her beast will, and due to his ability to control all 4 elements, he can help any mage of any type. Indeed, he begins to help her train. As soon as that training session ends, Tessia asks Arthur if he's angry about what she did at the hospital. Arthur can't find a suitable response and tries to evade the topic through joking, but she gets very upset with him. She tells him he's only good at fighting and using magic, and everyone notices that he wears a mask and pretends to be happy even when he's sad. Then she leaves him and exits the the place. Arthur is affected by her words, as he's still in an internal conflict. After all, he's just a grown man in a small child's body. He then goes to train to try to clear his mind a little, but he's interrupted by Professor Glory, who pretends she came to see Tessia before Arthur leaves and heads to class. There, he was still lost in thought because of Tessa's words after his last class of the day ended, and he left heading to his room. He then sees 3 shadows approaching him, which turn out to be the arrogant Lucas and his friends. Lucas orders Arthur in an annoying way to tell him how he avoided his attack on him, and also how he went to Tessa's location so quickly in their previous fight. But Arthur ignores his words, telling him there's no secret to what he did. Lucas starts to calm down and is about to leave, convincing himself that Arthur must have used some magical device to do what he did. But not everyone agrees with Lucas's decision to leave. We see Marcus starting to act out in a crazy manner, almost as if he's lost his mind from intense anger. He begins accusing Arthur of using those magical devices to seduce Princess Kathleen as well, while Lucas watches with a mischievous look on his face as he sees Marcus losing his mind and attacking Arthur. At this point, their companion notices that Marcus's power is much higher than usual, so Lucas leaves the place to distance himself from any future suspicion. Arthur starts using wind magic to create a shield to protect himself. But this alone wasn't enough, as Marcus had completely lost his mind. Arthur considers whether he should use his true powers and other elements or not. Sylvia interrupts him by transforming into a dragon, and easily knocks Marcus to the ground. Seconds later, Claire arrives at the scene, and examines Marcus's body to find writing indicating that some magical spell was used to control him. Claire then begins to tell Arthur that many similar cases to Marcus's have appeared recently. Before they enter the Principal Good Sky's office to report what happened, Arthur meets both Baron, Lucas's half-brother, and Elia, who leave to let the principal speak with Arthur and Claire. As they're leaving, Sylvia examines their power and warns Arthur that his level is far from theirs, so he should be careful and avoid them for now. Arthur then recounts what happened to Good Sky, and from her reaction, he realizes she knows something about the spell used on Marcus. However, she refuses to tell him anything about it. Arthur then leaves the principal's office. While heading to class, he sees Baron scolding Lucas. Arthur hides and starts eavesdropping to hear what's being said. He begins thinking to himself that he needs to become much stronger than he is now. To be able to kill Lucas, he must be prepared to confront his brother Baron. Unfortunately, while he's angrily thinking about these matters, he releases an aura of bloodthirst. In less than a second, before his eyes can notice what happened, he's surprised by Elia's sword at his neck. She asks him what he's doing in that place, but before he can answer, she tells him that his level is far from Baron's. Despite being one of the current kingdom's pillars like Baron, whom the kings chose to protect the continent, Baron's power is much higher than hers. She then tells him that her warning is because he reminds her of her late brother, who was about his age, before leaving him. The next day, the disciplinary council members meet, and we learn that Marcus has died. Even after going to the hospital, the mages couldn't restore all the mana he had lost, due to the curse that afflicted him. Then Claire informs them that night guard patrols will be set up to catch the sorcerer. Later in class, Arthur wakes up after sleeping through Gideon's explanation, before rushing off because he's late for the next class. When he arrives there, he finds Professor Glory, who tells him she won't allow him to train until he fully recovers. She then sends him to a room to watch them from above. When he enters that room, he finds Tess, who tells him she'll stop pressuring him to give her answers about his feelings for her. Arthur then says that this life is mysterious, making us feel that training our magic and body has become easy. But as soon as we compare it to training our emotions, we see the scale almost breaking from the weight of the comparison. He then tells Tessia that he can't accept her feelings now, but if she can wait until they grow up a little, he wouldn't mind then at all. Tessia jokingly tells him that she'll wait for him no matter how long it takes, as long as he promises he won't befriend anyone else. Arthur responds with a kiss on her forehead before leaving the place with a blush on his face. While Arthur is on his evening patrol, he catches troublemakers writing racist comments about elves and dwarves on the wall. After Theo takes them away for punishment, Arthur senses someone nearby. He quickly hides and is surprised to see a student running with the same spell mark that killed Marcus on his back. Arthur follows him without being noticed, but Kai interrupts by calling out to him, causing Arthur to lose track of the unknown person. At that moment, they see the communication device between their group light up, which turns out to be a distress signal from Theo and his friends. Arthur rushes there, leaving Kai despite his suspicions. Upon arriving at his group's location, he learns that someone attacked Theo from behind and knocked him unconscious. But Theo managed to wound the attacker's arm before passing out. Arthur then remembers seeing a bandage on Kai's hand when he last met him. The issue of the sorcerer continues to occupy Arthur's mind greatly. Even during the lesson, Gideon notices that Arthur isn't paying attention at all. However, he manages to clear his mind while helping Tessia train to control her mana beast. While they're talking, Principal Goodsky interrupts them, covered in wounds. Tessia runs to help her, but the principal assures her that she was just training. Arthur doesn't believe her, feeling that she's hiding something from them, but he doesn't know if it's good or bad. Afterwards, a meeting is held for the city's pillars, including Aaliyah, Baron, and Frey, who is considered the strongest mage among the city's pillars. They discuss the symbol Baron found inside the dungeon. It becomes clear that the piece bearing that symbol was made from a mana beast, and this technique is unknown to them, but they believe it belongs to another continent. We then learn that something has happened, causing large amounts of bloodworms to gather near the human city, so Elia must go there to inspect the place herself. During this time, Elijah was training hard with the robot before Arthur approached him, suggesting they train together. Arthur then throws him a wooden sword. Arthur notices significant improvement in Elijah's strength, with his feet steady and his strikes powerful. As soon as Arthur finishes testing Elijah's strength level, he ends the match and knocks him down. But while Arthur is helping Elijah up, he sees a hazy form of Arthur's previous self behind him. He begins to feel all of Arthur's pain, anger, and the betrayal he experienced. All these emotions start mixing together, causing Elijah a severe headache. Arthur rushes to help him, but Elijah tells him he's fine before saying goodbye and leaving. Days pass, and Arthur's relationship with his classmates strengthens, except for Elijah, who keeps distancing himself from Arthur day by day. Tessia has also finished her training and managed to tame the beast. With this, she's fully prepared for the dungeon they're going to. Arthur starts teasing her until she knocks him down, and then the old man uses his grandfather instinct to time his entry at that exact embarrassing moment. Tessia rushes to explain what happened to the grandfather. She then invites Arthur to accompany her to the dungeon, and he promises to go with her. Meanwhile, beneath the human city, we see Elia exploring the strange dungeon with her magic. She sees traces of bloodworm movements, all coming from the same place. She follows these traces to find herself in front of a two-headed snake. The strange thing, however, is the aura surrounding the snake from all sides. She then communicates with the city's mage, Frey, to inform him of the matter. He decides to send 50 mages to her, telling her not to do anything reckless until they arrive at the location. At this time, Arthur had invited Tessia to his house to celebrate New Year's together. Time passed quickly until Arthur's sister fell asleep, and his mother spent the rest of the night getting to know Tessia better. The next morning, after arriving at the dungeon in a distant, snow-filled place, Arthur notices that he no longer needs to cover his body with mana to protect from the cold. Sylvia is now performing this role for him. They all enter the place, but to their surprise, they don't see any monsters on the first 2 floors, which makes Professor Glory extremely worried. Before she can order them to leave immediately, many monsters appear at once, forcing them to retreat quickly. As usual, Lucas casts a fire spell on the monsters that almost hit the teacher, before all the students stop running and decide to test their skills now. With the teacher's approval, they form small combat groups to attack the monsters. Despite easily defeating the monsters, they see that the number of monsters only increases. Glory then orders them to retreat again, but huge monsters appear in front of them, hindering their progress. Glory begins to fight them to give Arthur some time to find a way out. With the help of earth mages, they quickly find that exit, but they tell Arthur that it has been blocked by rocks. What makes matters worse is the rising smell of monster blood and the lack of oxygen in the place. The only solution before them is to break those rocks with fire magic, but Prince Curtis has completely exhausted his mana. Arthur then removes Gideon's bracelet and begins to transfer fire magic mana to Curtis. As Curtis performs the spell and tries to open a path for them, the ground shakes beneath them, and a huge monster emerges. Around this monster, they see the strange black aura that surrounds its entire body. Glory quickly rushes to protect the students from it, but she's no match for it at all. Amidst all this, Arthur's body is completely covered in fire magic, so much that Curtis gets burned by blue flames when trying to touch him. Arthur then lunges at the monster with all his might and begins to execute his strongest techniques, combining both lightning and air magic, using the lightning tornado technique. To his surprise, the monster isn't much affected by his attack. Glory quickly pulls him away to escape, while Arthur is bewildered by what happened, as he couldn't even pull his sword back from the monster's body. After thinking they've distanced themselves from the monster, it surprises them and attacks Arthur with its claws, hitting his foot before its claws self-destruct. Arthur falls down the slope, nearly unconscious, but thanks to the beast's will, wind magic is automatically activated, softening his fall. The beast's will then begins to heal a large part of his wounds. Arthur gets up and starts looking for any exit. He finds a light shining from the cave and goes there, thinking he's found the way out. But nothing good comes that easily. Arthur sees many corpses of mages whose bodies have all been pierced by iron bars. Amidst Arthur's horror, he hears a faint voice calling for help, but he sees only blood-covered corpses around him. After moments of searching, Arthur finally finds the source of the voice, which turns out to be Aaliyah. He sees her drenched in her own blood, having completely lost her sight, her chest split by one of the bars, and her feet completely cut off. Arthur quickly tries to give her some of his mana, but her mana core has been completely shattered. She tells him he can't help her, With that core destroyed, only certain death awaits her. However, she gives him a small black device that will show him everything that happened. Arthur then sees that after Elia requested support, the attack squad arrived and defeated the two-headed snake in the blink of an eye. But afterwards, as they were extracting the monster's core, it evaporated, as if it had never existed in the first place. As they continue their way, they encounter a strange creature with two horns, emitting a massive black aura that nearly kills them from its pressure. With a single finger movement, it kills many mages before giving them two choices. Either it kills them, or they kill each other, and the winner can leave. The mages become angry at its words and attack it, but due to the power difference, it enjoys the fight as if playing with small children before killing them all with a finger movement. However, Elia manages to wound it, cutting off part of its horn before falling to the ground. Enraged, the monster tells her, "An eye for an eye," before ripping off her feet as she begs it to kill her from the intense pain. We return to the present, where Elia starts showing her true feelings, crying intensely and repeating, "I don't want to die." Arthur cries from his utter helplessness, as all he can do now is embrace her. At that moment, one of the city's pillar mages dies. Arthur then begins burying all the fallen mages before Sylvie comes to take him home. When he reaches his house, he can't enter in this state, not wanting to worry everyone. He sits in front of the door and starts thinking about what happened, wishing Elia could have another life. His father's voice interrupts him, telling him he doesn't have to say anything, but adds that life is full of battles, and we may lose many of them. However, as long as we keep getting up again, victory in the war will inevitably be ours. The next day, Arthur gives Elia's medal to Good Sky, who shows signs of horror at what happened, asking if he knows who killed her. Arthur lies and says no. She then tells him to stay completely away from this matter and leave it to the city mages to investigate. Arthur takes the advice and goes shopping with his family, but his mind is still preoccupied. He tells them he's going for a walk alone for a while. While wandering around, he sees an old building and is surprised by a beggar asking for money. When Arthur takes something out of his pocket, the beggar steals it and disappears in the blink of an eye before Arthur can even tell him it wasn't currency. Arthur ignores what happened and goes to open the door, which requires a lot of strength to open. Here he finds the old man, and Arthur gets angry with him, but the old man tells him he can take what he wants on the condition that its price doesn't exceed the value of the coin. After searching the place, Arthur finds nothing to take except a cat with very strange eyes. Nevertheless, Arthur tells the old man he doesn't want anything from the place, but the old man gives him a small crystal ball after seeing Sylvie, telling him he'll need it in the future. Then Arthur and Sylvie leave the place, after seeing the cat smile at them again. Then we go to Lucas, whom we see entering the headquarters of one of the factions that opposes the union between humans and other races. Therefore, we see them treating Lucas badly before their masked leader shouts at them and tells Lucas that he needs him for his plan. He offers to give Lucas the same spell that was used on Marcus, saying that the only reason for his death was his weakness. If Lucas gets those marks from the leader, he could then easily defeat Arthur. And because he's much stronger than Marcus, those marks won't negatively affect him. He continues telling Lucas that he's about to complete his plan, and then he'll be able to separate the three races again. At this time, Elijah was hugging Arthur, as he was worried about him after seeing the wounds of both Claire and Prince Curtis. After a while, Arthur leaves the place, heading to the training room to meet Tess. There, he sees her mana getting out of control, and the beast's will starting to control her body and attack Arthur. Arthur tries to draw his sword from the ring, but all that comes out is the small crystal ball, which enters Tess's body and restores her control over it. As soon as Arthur sees that her mana has calmed down, he quickly takes her to the hospital. After her condition stabilizes, Grandpa examines her and learns that what happened to her is due to her mana core advancing 3 stages at once. Her mana core has become silver-colored from the dark stage. While leaving Tessia to rest, Arthur asks Grandpa about the strength of the city's pillar mages. Grandpa tells him that they all have white mana cores, and to overcome one of them, 10 platinum-level mages must gather and attack simultaneously. Then Grandpa sits with Arthur and tells him he's about to explain the true history of Dicathan to him in full, but before this, he must promise not to tell anyone what Grandpa is about to tell him now. After Arthur promises, Grandpa begins his story. Hundreds of years ago, when humans, elves, and dwarves were just nomads, they formed an alliance with each other and only met for trade purposes. But at that time, life was difficult for all of them. Mana beasts attacked them continuously and decimated them. The population of the 3 kingdoms kept diminishing over the years until they were almost extinct. But as things got tougher, the light that brings relief shone brighter. One day, a powerful entity appeared to all the inhabitants of the continent and gave them 6 artifacts, 2 for each kingdom. These artifacts grant their bearers the power of magic, or what is known as mana. The artifacts were distributed to the strongest warriors from each kingdom, who later became known as the city's pillar mages. These warriors began teaching the rest of the soldiers the arts of magic as well, until they had a full army of powerful fighters. With this, they managed to eliminate most of the beasts on the entire continent. However, after defeating the beasts together, the inhabitants of the kingdoms began to separate, which led to the Three Kingdoms War 100 years ago. Even in that war, none of the city's pillar mages participated, as they were like a secret weapon for each kingdom. Although these mages were revealed to calm the citizens, the existence of 6 artifacts that grant their bearers the power of a white mana core level mage has never been and will never be revealed. Then Grandpa reveals to him the most important secret, that Sylvie is not just a beast. She is closer to the king class, as she can fully integrate with mana. This means that Sylvie doesn't just manipulate the mana surrounding her like other beasts, but she is the source of her own mana, like the entity that gave them power hundreds of years ago. Therefore, Sylvie's future potential and the power she will reach will be something the mind can never comprehend. After Arthur's session with the grandfather, he goes to the old man's shop and the mysterious cat, only to find it has disappeared. The old man left him a message with a small crystal ball, telling Arthur to go to the gate leading to the elves' kingdom. Arthur sets off, but as he passes through, strings of mana appear and pull him strongly to a pitch-black place. Upon entering, Arthur feels pressure from a strong aura that almost kills him, forcing him to kneel. The cat with strange eyes appears, saying it wants to talk to him. The cat transforms into its human form and introduces itself as Wayne Sam, but Earth's inhabitants call it the Great Entity. Meanwhile, we see Godiski returning to the academy at night. Suddenly, many masked wizards with the same curse mark that spread among academy students recently attack her from behind. However, they are no match for Godiski's power. She easily defeats them and tries to interrogate them. They refuse to tell a traitor anything, shouting that the war is about to begin. Godiski then ends their lives and starts treating her wounds. Strangely, she also has the curse marks on her back. We return to Arthur, who is very cautious as he knows the entity before him is much stronger than the kingdom's pillar wizards. Arthur asks about the crystal ball, and the entity explains it's a magical ball that can control mana and prevent it from exploding. It reminds Arthur of what happened during Tessia's mana beast rampage and when Marcus's mana exploded. The entity then shows Arthur a world map, revealing 2 continents on their planet, Dicathan, where they live, and Alacria. It explains that these continents are monitored by the continent of powerful entities, called Ephiotis, where Wayne Sam is from. Ephiotis inhabitants are strictly forbidden from interfering with the affairs of the other 2 continents, except in cases of great danger and disasters. Wayne Sam begins to tell Arthur about the current problem, but to understand it, Arthur needs to know about the division of Ephiotis itself. Despite being a continent of great entities, Ephiotis is divided into 3 factions. All must follow the continent's laws, which forbid interfering with weaker beings like humans, elves, and dwarves. However, this changed when the Petra faction, led by King Agrona, decided to interfere with human affairs. They began experimenting on Alacria's inhabitants to increase their own power. After all, their bodies are very similar to those of weaker entities, but with a huge difference in power. If they succeed in their experiments on humans, they'll be able to increase their faction's strength. After hearing all this, Arthur looks sad, but wonders why he was chosen to help solve this problem. Wayne Sam then transforms Sylvie into her dragon form, and explains that she's the granddaughter of their continent's strongest entity, maybe even the strongest of them all. She's so powerful that even the great entities tremble at the sight of her. That's why they want Arthur to cooperate and help them. With the power he gained from sharing Sylvia's strength, known as the Beast Will, he'll surely be able to win the battle. Arthur agrees without hesitation, knowing that if Alacria wins the war, all of Dicathan's inhabitants, including his family and friends, will be destroyed.